Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r Petty Revenge. In today's episode, neighbor took my parking spot after I shoveled. I poured water in his windshield. You're not supposed to be working. Press setup man doesn't want to do his job, has to do more work. My Petty Revenge, Parking Lot Edition. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Neighbor took my parking spot after I shoveled. I poured water in his windshield. It was a cold winter day. 8 inches of snow had fallen the night before, and the wind chill made it feel as if it were in the negatives, Fahrenheit. I drive an all-wheel drive SUV, so I have no issues getting out. My wife on the other hand drives a Prius, which slides with the smallest amount of moisture on the road. My car was down at the time, so we had to take my wife's car. I spent 45 minutes in the freezing cold shoveling that car out so we could get to the store. We were gone for an hour, and when we came back, our neighbor had taken the spot I had shoveled. Our apartment complex doesn't have assigned parking, but in the winter, it's understood that if you shovel a spot, it's yours. So when I saw his car in the spot I had just shoveled, I was pretty pissed. I went inside and filled 2-gallon jugs of water. Went back out and poured them on his windshield. Rinse and repeat. I must have poured about 10 gallons of water on his car. Being how cold it was already freezing by the time I poured the last gallon on. It sat like that overnight. The next morning, I got to watch as he helplessly tried to scrape all of these layers of ice off his windshield. Don't take my parking spot. You're not supposed to be working. This happened to me about 20 years ago, so the details might not be 100% accurate. At the time I worked as a cook/bartender/server at a local pizza place. Yes, every employee was trained to do all 3 jobs, and if you opened for the day, you did all 3 jobs, by yourself, for at least 4 hours. Sometimes 5 or 6 hours. I was scheduled to open every Sunday at 11 a.m. The people who owned this place owned another pizza place in a town 30 miles away. But the place I worked was their head office, for lack of a better word. That's where the supplies for both places were shipped. Since the other pizza's place didn't open until 3 p.m. on Sundays, the manager of the other restaurant would come into the restaurant I was working at around 2 p.m. to pick up supplies. Let's call her Kay. Normally I would get along with her just fine. Unless she went into BTCH mode, then she was unbearable. Usually, every week I would have everything she needed ready and waiting for her if I wasn't too busy cooking or helping a customer. I would even help her load it into her car. Then she'd leave and I'd continue doing my thing. The Sunday my story takes place was Mother's Day. I was already upset because I had to work instead of going to lunch with my mother. Almost as soon as I walked in, I started getting orders, because, well, it's Mother's Day. Around 2 p.m., Kay walks in and she was obviously in bitch mode that day because not only was the restaurant I was running at the moment supposed to be closed for Mother's Day, which the owners completely forgot to mention to me, I have other stories about them, but she still had to work. And she started tearing into me for having the audacity to milk the owners for a few extra hours worth the pay I wasn't entitled to. I called up the owners who confirmed I was supposed to be closed that day and they forgot to let me know. I was livid. Not only did I miss family lunch for Mother's Day, I now had to call customers to tell them their orders were now cancelled while listening to Kay all but accusing me of theft. Finally, as I was about to leave, Kay asked if I could help her load stuff into her car. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "I'm not supposed to be here, remember?" Then I walked out, leaving her to load everything by herself. I'm not sure if this qualifies as petty revenge, but I felt a little better for it. Edit, just to make a couple things clear. Yes, I did get paid for the time I worked. The owners were decent employers. I wouldn't have continued working there another 10 years if they weren't. They were just a bit obtuse at times. Secondly, Kay had no children of her own, and her mother, who she never got along with, had been dead for 10 years at that point, so she didn't celebrate Mother's Day. She just had a bee in her bonnet because I was supposed to have the day off, while she was stuck working. The reason for that being despite the restaurant I was working at being the main restaurant, her restaurant typically got about 5 times the amount of business than mine did on Sunday evenings, so the owners couldn't afford to close it for the day. Press setup man doesn't want to do his job, has to do more work. My first real job, after my apprenticeship, I was doing repair and maintenance on progressive dies for a manufacturer of energy controls. Almost all their dies were small, easy to lift. Their largest 2 dies were too heavy to lift manually. So they had carts, the correct height. Slide die off cart. Into press, run parts, then slide back onto cart. More difficult than it sounds. I did the maintenance on these 2 large dies. One day, I am summoned to the press department. One of the largest dies is in the press, setup man says. That I screwed it up, and he wants me to fix it. After some quick diagnosis, I try to politely explain that the die is crooked in the press and not centered on the feeder. His responsibility. Won't hear it, all my fault, I have to fix it. He wants me to do his job. That is not going to happen. Toolmaker, okay. Take it out. And I walk away. Setup man, but. Take it out means undo all the bolts, slide this 300-pound lump onto its cart. And push it the length of the building to the tool room. These carts didn't roll very well. This was a big pita. He does this. Toolmaker, I will call you when it is ready. I knew there was absolutely nothing wrong with this die. So I let it sit there. All day. Less than 90 minutes until end of shift. Toolmaker, it is ready, come and get it. Now he has to push it the length of the building, again. Put it back in the press, and set it up, again. Back where we were that morning. But this time, it runs perfectly. I made no changes, didn't even look at it. All in the setup. The next day, production supervisor comes by. Wants to know why he missed a day of production. I told him exactly what happened. He was not happy. 6 months later, dead of summer. Same thing happens. Same result. Toolmaker, take it out. He pushes it the length of the building. It sits there all day. He pushes it back. He sets it up correctly, and it runs fine. I made no changes, didn't even look at it. All in the setup. The next day, production supervisor comes by, again. Told him exactly what happened. He was not happy. I think the manager finally clued in on exactly where the problem was. Because it never happened again. My Petty Revenge, Parking Lot Edition. Today I had a bad day at work and just really wanted a margarita. I pulled into a local Mexican joint that has $12 pitchers, found a spot and began to pull in, just for a white Prius to cut me off and take my spot. I was annoyed, especially because they passed a spot a few feet further in favor of cutting me off. I got out of my car, and as I was walking in, the girl driving told her friend/husband/whatever, "Make sure you get us a booth." My original plan was to be passive-aggressive and just get inside before them as a small victory, but when I got inside, I noticed that there was only one more booth available. It wasn't a huge revenge plot, but you better believe I asked for that booth. I happily sipped my margarita and queso while they waited for a booth. It's the little things. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.